Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. I am Sam Moores, and with us today we have Luke Sutton. Hello.
Hello, Sam. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. Welcome to the podcast. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name's Luke Sutton, obviously working for Clive Sutton Limited. It's a father and son duo. So my father founded the business about 35 years ago. I personally joined 7 or 8 years ago. And my main focus is our operations. So the day-to-day management of our business, anything from the buying side, selling side, importation side, general management of our day-to-day operations. And Clive is very much still involved, and his focus is more on a strategic level. So he's focusing on the strategy, the finance, and sort of, not so involved in the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day, but he's still very much hands-on and involved.
Sure. So for you, I'm guessing this journey started literally when you were born. But was the business around when you were tiny?
Yeah, so it's a fair question. So yeah, you could argue I was born into the role. The business has been running for 35 years plus. So when I was growing up, there were always nice cars around. Originally, when my old man was 16, he started buying and selling cars from the front of his family home. His parents were doctors and were desperate for him to go into the academic career. But as most people know, once you have the taste for the automotive world, it sort of ropes you in. And he's incredibly passionate, lives, breathes, and dies for cars. So instead of going down the university route, he ended up joining a main dealership when he was 17. He spent 4 or 5 years there, and at 25, 26 years old, left and started off his own adventure. Now, originally that started off servicing and upgrading and sort of working with the Jaguar product, and alongside that started buying and selling a few Jaguars. And that sort of evolved eventually into getting the Jaguar franchise, so it became large franchise dealer for Jag. That then evolved into being a very large franchise dealer for Jeep, Chrysler, also for MG Rover at a time when they had sensible product back in the day. And this was sort of all pre-millennium stroke around the millennium sort of time. And in the early 2000s, sold out of all the franchises and became independent specialist. And over time, what we've been involved in has evolved and changed. But in the early 2000s, it was very much in sort of the hypercar, supercar sort of territory. Ferraris, Astons, Bugattis, that sort of ilk of cars. And as time sort of progressed, we moved into more volume-based cars. So now we pretty much would have a go at anything between the 40,000 to 250,000 price point, up to about 5 years old and up to about 50,000 miles. With a few exceptions here or there, but generally we would stock pretty much anything in that criteria. And alongside that, we have our specialist import side of the business, where we import generally, very desirable US, Canadian models like Cadillac Escalades, Dodge Challengers, Mustangs. And we're one of, I would say, the leading player in the UK of focusing with specialist import products. And we also do a lot of bespoke programs. So we will take, there's a few specific models which we'll obviously run through in more detail. But when the Mustang was released in right-hand drive in 2015, we created, we'd been working with American-based cars for decades, but we created a very bespoke program for the UK-based Ford Mustang. And, we're supercharging cars up to 850 brake horsepower and doing all sorts of bonkers things to them. And we work with also the Mercedes-Benz, so Sprinter and V-Class, where we are stripping them out completely and doing VIP conversions. So, the business has evolved into, I would say, very varied and very diverse in what we're involved in and what we would, what we buy and sell.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like quite a fun, diverse bunch of stuff to be dealing with. So did you go straight in to the company, or did you go away and then come in?
Yeah, fair question. So I think because I grew up always surrounded by very nice cars, I wouldn't necessarily have described myself as a natural petrol head. I think, they were always around me. And I think, I went to university, I went to Nottingham University, I got a business management degree. Initially wanted to get into management consultancy because a lot of my focus and interest comes from, the entrepreneurial side of things or the business side of things. And, I ended up after university going into one of the big corporates, spent 6 months there, absolutely hated it. Thought the corporate world for me felt spineless, and there was no element for many, many, many years of having any form of creativity or really proper involvement. So I came back to the business initially to make some money to go traveling for a year and sort of have an assessment of where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
Started selling cars, started getting involved, and we're 6-7 years later, and now fully involved.
Nice. I've got quite a few friends who sort of, I'd say, started down a similar route at the start. Some are still in the management consultancy roles, and I don't know how they do it, to be honest. I have no idea. Like getting farmed out to various companies, left, right, and centre.
Yeah, I think it's also just being a small cog in just an enormous wheel. The company I was at, 7,000 employees. I mean, a graduate coming out of uni, to be frank, they have very little real care for. And I think in the terms of then coming into the family business, appreciating the history and appreciating, the respect that we sort of have in the industry. I think if we were just mundeling, if it was just retailing BMWs or we had 5 or 6 products and we were a franchise dealer, I think it would be less interesting. I think we're involved in so many different niches and we're always pushing the boat with what we're doing to cars and cars we're thinking about getting involved in. Every single week, every single day, there's new challenges, new hurdles to get over. So it certainly keeps the mind active.
Yeah. And I've been having a bit of a browse over the website, and I sort of had heard of you guys because of American cars. I think it's probably where I've come across you before. I know you did do a lot of importing. Now, and I'm thinking about it, I haven't really seen cars. I'm not aware of anyone else that does it. Now, I'm sure there are people that do it, but that says to me that it's probably slightly complicated.
Yes.
And there's got to be things in it that make it a bit interesting and sort of why you wouldn't necessarily jump in.
Correct.
Talk to me about importing cars.
Yeah, so I think generally the market for US cars is now quite considerable. And, if you go even when I joined the company, sort of 2015-ish sort of time, there was this shift in quality of cars that the US were producing. And I think, everyone has in their mind the stereotype that, a Mustang, very nice performance, can't go around corners, got plastic interior. And when you compare that against the UK or the European offering, where, cars generally have been very well built, interior quality is very nice. I think in more recent times, the production in America has just come so far. So, there are plenty of makes and models that I can list off that actually, when you put them alongside what the relative competitor would be in the UK, apart from standing up on a quality basis, you then bring value into mind. And, there's countless examples of US-based performance cars where you can be getting 700-800 horsepower high performance vehicle, buying them new for well under £100,000, which, when you think in the UK offering, there's very few cars that you can even get anywhere near. So,
Yeah.
I think there's a few players in the UK that do it. I think what distinguishes us from them is when any new model comes out, we will more or less commit to buying half a dozen of them straight away. We will always
Okay.
try to bring the first ones in so that we can have them before competitors. But some of the bigger value items, the Cadillac Escalades, the new model, we're talking upwards of $120,000 for a brand new car. And once you do the importation and the customs duty, you're dealing with quite weighty items. So, we're able to
literally and financially.
Exactly that. You then have the difficulty of the process of actually importing the cars. So, the the process of buying a car in the US is nothing like the UK. You agree with a UK based dealer. If you have signed paperwork and you have a deposit over, you have that order with that dealer. In the US, they don't quite have the same integrity as we do here. So, we have tried to buy countless cars that we have put deposits down, we have signed paperwork for, and the cars somehow vanish. Now, the reason they vanish is because they have in the US a pricing structure called MSRP, which stands for the manufacturer's suggested retail price. That means that different dealers, for example, if we're talking about a Cadillac Escalade, if they get the understanding that actually there's a premium going for these cars right now, they can very legitimately sell those cars for higher prices than a Cadillac dealer down the road. Whereas in the UK, if you walk into Land Rover, you walk into Ford, you walk into Porsche, the manufacturer sets a list price and all of those dealers sell the cars for those list price. So if you're ordering cars and all of a sudden the demand and supply has changed and there's premiums going for it, the dealers will, without any regret, sell it to the highest bidder. They don't care about honoring any previous agreements. If they can sell the car for more money, they'll sell the car for more money. So I think the nature in acquiring the cars themselves are a little bit more challenging. Once you purchase them, there's a huge admin and logistical trail from getting the cars out of the dealers there, getting them to their local ports from wherever the dealers are, because, a lot of the cars that we're working with are very short in supply. So we may find a car in the middle of Texas, nowhere near any port that's shippable. Yeah. So we have to arrange the shipping and logistics to get the car even to the port. Once you ship the car over, the admin trail begins with HMRC on our side and the DVLA, because when it arrives, you have 10% duty and 20% VAT on modern-based cars. Classic cars, you have a slight exemption. They don't have quite the same import duty levels, but you have 30% of taxes as soon as that car arrives at the UK port. And then once it arrives at the port and you've gone through the customs clearance, you've notified HMRC that the vehicle's here, the cars have to go through a very stringent process with the DVLA called the IVA, which is the individual vehicle approval. Now, in order to get the cars passed, there's various adaptations that are needed in order for them to comply to UK safety standards. Now, most of them really relate to the lighting side of things. So we're talking about side repeaters, brake lights, where the rig fog light is placed. We also have some cars that surpass decibel levels, so we have to address those situations. But it's a very complicated process, and it's never a guarantee as to what each examiner deems each car. I often describe it to customers as it's almost similar to a school examiner having a criteria of how to mark an exam, but ultimately that school examiner is going to have its own opinions or its own stance on certain things. We had 10 F-150 Raptors that we had sold, delivered, imported, registered, and the 11th one was failed on something that 10 other cars were already on the road for. And, which is just, and there's countless examples of makes and models that the DVLA or the DVSA will take a peculiar stance on, and you have to find workarounds in order to get them passed. At the moment, we've got 2 Toyota Alphas, which are the equivalent of the V-Class, but made for the Asian market. So these were sourced from Japan.
Okay.
We forward sold the cars before they arrived, and they arrived in the UK in December. Now, because it is a 3.5 litre petrol hybrid, the DVSA and DVLA took a very difficult stance on the emissions and how we have to qualify the emissions so we know what tax band the car fits for in the UK. We are still going through that process, and these cars arrived in December, and we have had to spend over £8,000 on an emissions grade report where we've had to isolate where the electric input from the hybrid power section is coming from. And, it's been a complete nightmare. So I can see why many people are put off the process, because it's evolving, it's changing, and there will always be curveballs thrown in that you weren't necessarily expecting or anticipating.
Okay, and so some importing, I know people will have all sorts of reasons, but why would someone import? What's the sort of logic behind importing a car like that to the UK when, you could just buy a right-hand drive, whatever V-Class or something?
In the terms of the Alphard or just general imports altogether?
Yeah. Generally when there's similar. So yeah, stuff like the Alphard.
The Alphard has been... We always knew there was going to be interest in it because there's a huge community of, individuals that have moved here from Japan and China. And, I think as a consumer, they generally are very brand loyal. So those cars are out there in abundance. They are actually quite an amazing setup with how the seating configurations can work. They have more unique options than I would say a V-Class has as standard. And, it's familiar to them. So when it's over here and they realize they can buy it and they realize they can have, all of the normal manufactured experience in the terms of being able to finance it and have warranty protection, they like it as a potential option. Yeah, I can see you've got the pictures up.
Oh, wow. So these clearly get done by a few people. I've got some pictures up for those that are listening. They look nice. I could see why you would have one of these. They're crazy exterior design.
I think Marmite is the way to describe it. You either think it looks revolting or you think it looks lovely. I'd say my stance is probably right in the middle. But we've been truly stunned. I mean, we could have sold the two that we had 30 times over. And if we hadn't had the complications we had with the DVLA in registering them, we would have already had imported, half a dozen or a dozen more. The thing is, now that we've gone through this process and we've successfully got to the end of it, we can now bring in others without any complication. So we will now be bringing in others because the level of interest and demand has just been ridiculous.
And what sort of cost uplift do you have on a car? Are you saying it's 10% and then 20%? That's probably not quite. It's sort of 30% ish, and then plus some fees and whatnot and stuff along the way. Like with things like the Cadillacs and stuff, is it generally someone's had one at home and they want one here? Or just some people just go, I just really want one?
It's so varied. I think sort of what I mentioned before about the general overall quality now of the cars being so much better than they were. When you're dealing with something like an Escalade, I mean, the typical buyer is someone who has got a large family of 5 people plus. They need to be able to drive around and still have luggage space. And there isn't really a car in the UK you can do that with without putting a roof box on the top of the roof. So you then start dealing into these large American SUVs and why people would buy them. You can get 7 or 8 full-size people, and I'm not talking silly jump seats in the back where no one can sit properly. You can get 7 or 8 genuine seats with boot space enough for maybe 6 or 7 full-size pieces of luggage. So, as a way to get the family around, there actually isn't a UK offering for that specific car. When you think SUVs, the 7-seat SUVs, generally they have poxy jump seats in the back and no boot space. So, I think that's the answer on the SUV side of things. I think when you come to the muscle car side of things, it's slightly different. And I think a lot of people have had that Mustang poster on the wall, or have watched the film, Bullet, Chase, Gone in 60 Seconds, where the flagship cars are these iconic US muscle performance cars. And it's often a dream for people to own one. And, when they find out there's a UK-based company who is, giving all the comforts and benefits that they could have as if they were buying a Mercedes C-Class or a Porsche or whatever it is, it becomes quite compelling. And you then compare pricing-wise, a brand new Dodge Challenger Hellcat wide body, 717 brake horsepower for £105,000. You do a Shelby GT500 Mustang, 760 brake horsepower, the fastest production muscle car Ford has ever made, 115 to 120,000 pounds. And then you think, well, what could you get for that sort of money? You're obviously in 911 money, you're in Aston money, maybe used Continentals. And there's something very different and special about having, an iconic, V8 engine that a lot of people have seen in films and dreamed of.
And there's none here. So no, there's not going to be any others. Chances are you probably will, because that's how the world works, but unlikely to see some other ones. Because things like the Hellcat, those cars, when they came out, and there's, America's been doing that sort of thing for a while, but you look over and go, how can you buy a car like that for the prices that they are in the States? I know they're made there and whatever, blah, 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 blah. But when you look at sort of American performance cars, and I know they're a bit different to European performance cars, but they're so much cheaper. For relative sort of engine spec, whatever. It's just a huge chunk less. So I guess that in itself means that when you do bring them over and you pay all the stuff and whatever, like you said, they still sort of sit in quite a nice. They're not just like 200 grand for something.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something really good there. It's also something different. When you're the sort of person who, I wouldn't say is a serial car buyer, but once every 1 or 2 years has been changing your cars, gets to 3 years old and you chop out of it, you sort of tick those boxes and then you think, well, what's next on the list? We have had so many people in the last few years who have gone into an American car for the first time, part exchanging with us. We had a gentleman who part exchanged a Porsche Taycan with us about last month. And he's got this American buzz in him. He's bought 3 different Mustangs from us in various iterations. And I think once you start ticking down the list of cars that you've done, experiences that you've had, then you start looking at, well, what else can I get? And, it's a completely different experience. When you're buying a muscle car that's got, 800 horsepower-ish plus and, their rear wheel drive, it's a much more raw, it's a much more experience orientated purchase. Some would say not a sensible purchase, but, I have never delivered a car, specifically the performance stuff, to any customer who hasn't called me within 24 hours and just been, my mind is blown. I can't believe I didn't do this earlier. And then comes back and, adds all sorts of different American cars or imports to the lineup because it's something completely different.
Yeah. And is there like a gateway drug that seems to get people in, or?
It depends on their reason for buying. I mean, all customers buy things ultimately for different reasons. Some are practical reasons, some are emotional reasons. Mustang is generally, because Ford released the Mustang in right-hand drive, I think it gave a lot of buyers in the UK the experience of what the American purchase would look like. And I think that then opens up into, right, well, the next step's probably a Challenger or Camaro. Then it's, well, actually my family could do with a bigger car. Do I go for a Lincoln, a GMC? And so, yeah, I think probably the gateway drug, if that's what you'd like to call it, I'm sure Ford wouldn't like to hear it, but is probably the Mustang.
Yeah. I think if I was if I was going to get an American muscle car, and I could see how at some point in time you're like, well, I've driven, I've tried all these various experiences and whatnot, and I've not had an American muscle car, and like they are a thing. Like they're quite a big chunk of movies and culture and whatnot. And then for me, it would have to be a Mustang. Would have to be the first way in, and probably an old one. Although I don't know. I've been in one Mustang. I think I've been in one older Mustang, and it definitely had some issues. Was a bit iffy. Seemed a bit sketchy. And that's not really what I'm about. So I'm sure they vary massively depending on how much
for sure.
work
I mean,
and money you put
classic
into them.
cars can be, a labor of love, and we do. Apart from importing classic cars for people, so we could have a customer come to us, give us his rough criteria of what he's looking for, and we will go outsource and find one. We also build in the UK, I would say 3 to 4 a year of fully restored 1967 or 1968 Mustangs.
Okay.
And that process is quite fascinating. We can start off with a car that we would deem as semi-workable, or we can start off with a complete rusting shell and start the process from start to finish. So, I think depending on what someone's budget is, what their vision is, what they're intending on using the car for, the pricing for a reasonable classic Mustang, can start anywhere from the 40 to 50,000 pound mark, and quite easily go into the 300,000 pound mark, depending on how much money's been spent on it, how much of the car is original, if it's a licensed Shelby or not a licensed Shelby. But we've been involved in classic Mustangs for nearly 3 decades. And, we will often have someone approach us with a rough idea or agenda or something they're fixed on. And after really sounding them out and getting to the, the nitty gritty of what the purchase is for, we guide them through the process and either can try and source a car that's built that ticks the boxes, or we go through the process of walking them through the project of building their own one.
That's pretty quite fun. Like dealing with the different customers, and then also trying to piece together what the vision is, and like.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, I think we like on a purchase like that, or when someone commits to a very custom build, and I'll share my screen with you shortly and go through some of the custom builds that we're working on. We like the customer to be involved as much as possible, because, there are so many different custom options. We're not just talking about choosing a couple of different engines, choosing a couple of different body colors and a few selectable options like you would normally have on a car. I think with our modern Mustang offering, we've got a 15-page brochure of, a list upon list upon list of different options, even down to the details of the stitching color and the color on some of the branding badges. And, it's a very unique purchasing experience because, you're fully involved in the design and the concept. And as the builds progress along, we very much, people can either come down and see the cars, or, we can share all the footage. And, when you eventually get the end product, you've put so much more into the process. You're so much more bonded with the car by the end of it. We very rarely see them back. I mean, the 1967 Mustangs, I think in the past 7 or 8 years, I think we've maybe had 3 or 4 back that we were involved in building. Mostly the customers end up keeping them and treasuring them, and it's that sort of purchase that you think you're going to hand down to your kids at some stage. So yeah, I think going through that custom process is great. And I think we've invested heavily in digital configurators and processes because it can be a very complicated process. Not everyone, very few customers have the technical understanding or, experience in ever modifying cars before.
What would be a sort of standard set of things? I know each one's different, yada, yada, yada. But like, what's the sort of standard sort of things that someone might do with a classic Mustang?
If we're starting with a car that they already own, the main thing is they just want to understand, is it a good car? So I think that the fundamentals when you come to a classic are obviously rust-free, bodywork, frames all intact, obviously suspension, braking, the fundamentals of the car operating properly. Once we're at that base level, a lot of the interiors hadn't had any love in a huge amount of time. So, doing upholstery and trimming. But a lot of the time, people are just focused on, I want power and I want noise. I want a new engine. I want a big block engine. I want a V8. I want a new exhaust. I want this to sound and, be powerful like it should be. The truth behind it is there's often a lot more that needs to be done in the pecking order before you get to those elements.
Yeah.
There's no point sticking on a big block engine onto a car if it's going to fall apart while you've got it on it. So, we guide people, we take the cars in, we give very honest, thorough reports on conditions of cars, what our advice would be. We map out a plan of, if you haven't got this as your budget to do right now, these are the things we put as priority. These are the things to consider in a year's time. And, eventually this is the end goal.
Yeah, because you never really know, or you don't know what the car is actually like until you blast all the paint and filler and whatever off it. Now, presumably, not everybody wants to do that on their car. So I guess there's always going to be an element of slight sort of guesswork at condition, unless you're going for the full restoration.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a car in about 2 months ago where the customer originally was wanting to do the upholstery and flooring because it looked like it was damp. We pull the carpet up, and all of a sudden we found like a pit of bones, actual bones, like animal bones. So we start pulling it away, and then you can see that some sort of rat or mouse had been scouring away, and you could see the actual bones of the animal there, and had caused all sorts of damage to the actual body of the car itself. So it's certainly a case of a discovery as you go along. You can there's only so much you can see on the naked eye until you start getting into the nitty gritty of it. So we try to work. We're never the type of people that will take a car in, start committing to loads of work, start pushing the envelope out. We understand people have varying budgets. We're fortunate that we're based very centrally in London, and we're surrounded by a lot of affluent customers, some of which, money isn't the top agenda. They just want the best quality. And we deal with other people where obviously budgets and what they're spending are much more of a focus. So, we work with everyone in a very fair and honest way, and start off with just conducting an overall report and review. And as things progress, we keep them informed and, work with them to get exactly what they want to achieve.
Yeah. So I'm aware of quite a few people I know, and I know it happens a lot, is you send a car in for someone to do some work, and they start the work, and then they're like, and then we found this, and then we found this, and you're like, but you then end up, you get to that point where cars get kind of like halfway, but you can't leave it halfway, otherwise they're literally worth like nothing. And you're like, okay, this is going to turn into a 2-year build just because I can commit X amount of money every now and then, and we'll eventually get there, or, that sort of thing. So it's definitely a hazard of working with things. And people, I think, most people I know are reasonably honest and upfront about, like, this is what we think, but we don't know. Like, it's possible that, there could be a mouse that's just destroyed everything, or one little drip of water in the garage has been on one place and it's gone through the entire car all the way through. So at what point did you start modifying sort of newer cars, like the Mustangs and stuff?
I think the Mustang, we've always been involved. I mean, Clive's passion has always been modifying cars. I think his first car he got ended up putting suicide doors or something silly on. He's always had a passion on tinkering with cars. And I mean, I now share that same passion. I can't have just a normal standard car, always doing something to it. You know, I think over the years, we always had requests from people, you know, can you wrap this? Can you tint this window? Can you do this dashboard? Actually, I quite like the wheels to be a slightly different color. And our issue is that we can never say no to business. So we take on all sorts of ridiculous projects. And so, you know, we've taken many decades of experience in modifying and upgrading cars. I think really in the past decade has it become, you know, a considerable part of the business. And, you know, apart from the classic Mustang and modern Mustang, I mean, the modern Mustang being released in right-hand drive made it a mass volume car here. So we made a very conscious decision that we were going to invest quite heavily in a Mustang modification program just for that car. And I think since 2015, we're over 90 cars now that we've done some considerable level of build on. And I'll actually show you part of the investment, and I will, for those not able to see screen, I will run through slightly. But we spent a year and a half developing a very high quality 3D configurator. So for those that are listening, you can go on suttonmustang.com. Nice. And within this configurator, you can spec out pretty much exactly the offering we have, the power packages. You can see we do more modest power package upgrades. So we do an engine tune and a remap and a cold air intake for the 500 odd horsepower upgrade. Also can go up to 700 and 800 horsepower. You know, you can flick here and you can then see different exhaust options we have. You can go into the exterior side of things.
Nice.
And you can really see in very good detail what the final output of each decision is going to be. And I mean, this has been hilarious for us at times where we've had families come in, father, son, daughter, and we've got the kids pointing out to their dad, oh, you've got to get this, that looks great. And you know, you've got to get the lights are brilliant. And, you know, we're watching the children basically upselling their dad into basically a much larger build.
Have you found having the configurator in itself has been very good for, like you said, upselling or just, you know, explaining to people all the options and giving them an overall idea? Because when you get an option sheet, and I've seen it for some like high-end resto mods and stuff, where you just get a list. And unless you really know like what exactly it is, especially when it comes to things like interiors and stuff, it's like the stitching, everyone's been on, you know, your Porsche configurator or whatever, the stitching for the blah, blah, blah. And you're like, I don't know what that is. It's somewhere. But like...
So yeah, I mean, I think the configurator has been fundamental. And I think apart from it, you know, just for the Mustang side of things, I mean, the car world has really gone digital, really, especially as a result of COVID. People moving around less, people more willing and trusting to actually go through this process on a fully digital stance. So, you know, I think the configurator has been crucial for the success of that program. One, because you can see just through some of the options I've scanned through now, there are generally very considerable length of options you can choose. And when you see something written down, you don't get an understanding of what it looks like, you know. So one, it enables us to present to someone who doesn't necessarily know the ins and outs of what a rear valance even is, you know, or someone who doesn't understand what different side scoops are, or, you know, to really hold their hand and walk them through and say, right, well, this is what it's going to look like. This is you can submit for a quote here. You'll get the full breakdown of exactly what that will cost. And then you can say, well, yeah, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't want to do this. So it's been fundamental for making the purchasing process as quick and as simple as possible. It's also enabled us to do business in different parts of the country and in different markets across Europe, where someone can't just walk into the showroom and see what's going on. So, we have a dealer set up in France, in Paris, who uses this configurator. He sends us the cars, we build them, he specs them out with his customer. And his sales guys are obviously not going to have as in-depth of understanding of what we do compared to us. But with this tool, it enables them to be able to run through the customer journey in very much the same way, and still get the sales and understanding. So yeah, it's definitely, for the Mustang side of things, it's been fundamental. And we're actually just in the process. We do a full conversion on the London-based VIP, the London Taxi. And we're just in the final throes of also building a full configurator for that, because it will be fundamental for it.
So talk me through, I saw that at a show, can't remember which one of the London ones.
Sound Pre-Day? I think it was Pre-Day, probably.
Yeah, that one. And so I, as a kid, there was someone that lived near me that had a London Taxi with a driver in it. And I'm pretty sure back then it was basically just a taxi, except it was a private vehicle, and they used it to get chauffeured around. Who buys a London Taxi now that's obviously not just someone being a taxi driver?
So our general customer for something like this, I would say, is high net worth individual that obviously has a driver, corporates, entrepreneurs. We've just done 3 to a members club in Palm Beach, Florida, that we've got the order for and we're progressing with. We have a few very large London-based hotels that are very interested. And I think, if you're thinking about the private individual first before going on to the corporate, people who are chauffeur driven don't always want to arrive in a big flashy Rolls Royce Cullinan, or, they don't want to always arrive and make a statement. A lot of the time people want to arrive and actually be under the radar. So when you start off with the base car that is so instantly recognizable that no one will look twice, a lot of people, and that is fully designed for the rear passengers in mind, you've got a huge amount of working space in the back of a taxi. If you think when you go into one and you sit and you think about the space that you have in front of you, as opposed to sitting behind the seat of a Range Rover, you instantly have more space. The suspension and the design is set up for the rear passenger, so they're a very comfortable ride. But the thing they're lacking from standard is they don't, they're obviously not the most luxurious car on the inside, because you have to comply to all of TfL's standards and regulations. So what we actually, this was not a fundamental part of our business plan whatsoever. We had built a V-Class with a similar custom interior for a customer of ours. He said to us, would we consider doing it to the London Taxi? We said, well, not our plans, but we'd have a look. Within 24 hours, one arrived at my office. He said the car's arrived, and work on it, and let's build something. So we built our first one about 8-9 months ago. We did one PR release on it that went viral in over 35 countries or something ridiculous. Off the back of that, we then started formal discussions with LEVC, who are the manufacturer of the car. And, myself and Clive, we took the taxi down to their main production office, so their main manufacturing plant. We had the CEO, head of sales, head of marketing, blown away by what we were doing.
Yeah, I bet they loved
it. They thought, it creates a whole different appeal and outlook to the taxi. And, from that moment on, we became officially authorized by them. So everything we do is done with the manufacturer's consent. You get full 3-year warranty on the base car. You get 3-year warranty from us on the conversion. So you have an OEM style warranty package on something so custom. And we're now doing them in more volume, really, than I think we ever anticipated. So we've gone down the route now of also building yet another one of our lovely configurators.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And this, we're in the final stages. This is going to be launched, I would say, within the month. We're basically there now.
Yeah.
But again, you can go inside and, we can set these up so that it's just for 2 passengers in the rear with a fully cut off division. Let me just make this all a bit lighter so you can see. And again, I'll give you the links after so the podcast listeners can actually see this and see what we're sort of running through here. But, in the Divide itself, you've got different options with how many seats you can have there. So you can have a straight wall, or you can have 3 drop-down seats depending on how many passengers. So you can really set them up to be super flexible depending on how each customer's planning on using it. You may have someone who wants to have 6 people in the back. You may have someone who just wants to drive in it alone.
It's quite a nice idea. I'd not really thought about it from the sort of flying under the radar side of it, because like a lot of these things, whether it's a V class of various, sort of Mercedes size or whatever, or, your typical luxury vehicle, you are very much making some sort of statement whether you want to or not. And it's not just, I like a nice comfy car. It's, whatever that image is, and then you get out and, so-and-so, you just turned up in a Phantom or whatever. Whereas this, like you say, you're just cruising through traffic. Everyone's like, oh, it's just a taxi.
Exactly that.
And then, inside, you've got all the good stuff. Exactly.
And, the stuff that we're using really is the best that money can buy, really. All the leathers of Bentley Napa leather. We've got 30 different genuine mahogany wood samples that someone can use for the veneers. We've taken the Rolls-Royce self-closing door mechanism so that the doors can self-close.
Nice.
In the middle armrest, we've got the retractable tables that you take from the Maybach. I mean, they're, an staggering cost for 2 tables, but trialed and tested parts that have been put in other cars. And, you find yourself in a cabin that's hugely spacious, very comfortable. And, we can also fit them with multimedia screens so that you can either, have Apple TV, you can have PlayStation, you can have the news on there, you can have Sky Go, and you can use it as a workhorse to get in and around while you're sitting in traffic and not usually doing anything.
Does anyone register them as a taxi? Yeah, I don't want to do that. It's like, can you do that?
You can't do that with our conversion in them, no. So you can register them. To license a taxi properly, the car itself needs to go through a yearly inspection with Transport for London, and your driver has to have a taxi license. So assuming you have both of those things and you have no conversion, then you can buy them and have a driver and use the bus lanes, etc. As soon as we start doing our level conversion, it takes it away from being registrable in that format.
But
a fair question.
We may see some taxis, who knows, that drive around taking their chances.
What customers do once I hand over the keys is completely down to them.
Exactly.
But, obviously, exactly. But, most of the people we've sold them to at the moment, I think have really loved them.
Yeah.
I think it's something so different. Super comfortable, arrive completely off grid. And now that this configurator is finished, myself and Clive have been to a few international dealers, some in Europe and some in the Middle East. And, there's various markets that are super interested because, it's also on trend. The car itself drives purely on electric power. It's got the eco-friendly image to it. And, it's iconic. When we did the PR release, we never assumed it was going to go the way it did. Yeah. And, there was country, if you go on Google News and type in Sutton VIP taxi, there are countries and languages come up that I've never even seen before. And I think it's because it's the iconic London taxi,
Yeah.
then taken to, a very luxurious level. And it's been, I would say it's probably been the biggest surprise product for me since I've been working. Clive, as soon as we built one of them, he's got a very natural ability at smelling and seeing opportunity. And I'll be honest, I thought he was mad to start with. And, his gut is generally usually right.
Yeah.
It has been unbelievable.
Yeah, it's the sort of business side of it, or selling to businesses, makes perfect sense. The more I think about it, the more it makes more sense. Like selling to, let's say London, for example. Now, London hotels, London Taxi, if you've got a lot of international customers, that's great. And then you get in it and you're like, oh, wow, this is insanely luxurious. This could be your chauffeur car rather than a, whatever it is, Rolls Royce or something. But also the thing about London taxis, great turning circles. You can have like 5 seats. Like, you probably wouldn't do the 6, but you can have 5, which 5 passengers, they don't fit in a luxury vehicle. There are no other luxury vehicles really without having jump seats and whatever, and no one does that. Where you can take all those people, or the one that I sort of see more now, prams, obviously.
Obviously.
All that sort of stuff. So it makes a lot of sense. And I didn't realise the sort of scope of that market, but it is quite large, especially for this sort of thing.
I think it's also when you then bring price into the equation, because, our starting conversion starts at 105, including VAT. We go up to
Plus
about
car.
135, 140, including brand new car.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So including brand new car, delivery miles, registered first into your name, you've got 105 starting, and then goes up to about 140, 145, including VAT. And when you think a company purchase, most will do away with the VAT and reclaim it. When you start thinking about the sort of other cars that they might have to have on their books to have a similar-esque sort of experience, Maybachs, for example, double, triple the price when spec properly. Bentleys, again, maybe double the price. Long wheelbase Range Rover now, I think, is into the late 100s, 170, 180s. This is on a price point very compelling.
And EV.
And EV friendly. It does have a 1.5 litre petrol generator. So if the EV power runs out, the petrol generator will kick in. The car will not drive on the engine itself. That generator essentially charges the EV power. So then it drives purely on EV power alone. So yes, environmentally.
Is that the same in all of them? Is that the standard powertrain for the London Taxi? I did not know that. That is, I feel like that's a slightly hidden fact.
It is. You assume that they're fully electric and, you see them charging everywhere. But they've all got 1.5 litre petrol generator. And, you can set it in various different modes to do just EV or a combination of the two. I think most cabbies use it as a pure electric car when possible, obviously, because the running costs are so substantially cheaper. But I think it's about 80 miles is a full one charge on the electric power side of things.
Oh, that's not tons.
No.
But then I guess it's not got a super massive battery and probably doesn't take that long to charge. And then also, if it's on a fleet type situation or this sort of thing, you just charge it at night, don't you? And then you're done.
I mean the chargers. I don't know if have you ever had an electric car or ever dabbled in that direction?
E208. So a little Peugeot.
E208, fine, little Peugeot. So the general chargers you get at home are around the 7 kilowatt mark. Now, a 7 kilowatt charger would generally charge most fully electric cars in about 8 hours. Now, if you see on the side of the street, you've got those big sort of semiconductor-looking boxes.
Yeah.
They're 100 to 150 kilowatts. I mean, that would fully charge this, in under half an hour. You can charge. We just had a Porsche Taycan that went out where in 45 minutes it will get you to about 180 miles or something. So, around London now, there's more and more of these power units popping up. And I think the range anxiety that people used to face is sort of getting a bit shorter. But ultimately, if you're buying this setup of car, you're generally thinking much smaller journeys. It's not really the one that you're going to go to the airport in or go to other cities in. It's generally going to not hop around town.
Yeah, it's 10 miles one way, 10 miles back max, like that sort of thing around town. So in the like longer journey things, and I've always looked at converted V-classes, and other vehicles are available. You see them occasionally, but generally V-class seems to get picked. Why does V-class get picked the most, apart from in other countries?
I think... one, if you're going to do the sort of conversion that we end up doing, you want to start with the nicest base car. Because, if you're going to go for what turns out to be fully loaded £175,000, are you going to skimp off £20,000 on the base car to go for, like a Renault Transporter or a Peugeot Transporter versus going for Mercedes? So, I think there's one element where, in the passenger van segment, they are the best and the nicest to start with.
Yeah.
The new EQVs, if you go for a Premium Plus, comes with a full air suspension setup. So the ride is really, really good. So when you're thinking about ride comfort, the comfort is sensational. And then also it's the workable space. So I'm just going to share my screen with you again. On the Mercedes product, we do two levels. Well, we do two different real offerings. One is the Sprinter base, which is very large, and to be, I think it only can really appeal to corporates because very few people have space to park something of this size.
Yeah, I was at a
if you go to V-Class,
that had one of those for shuttling people around. But that makes sense.
Exactly that. And they have ample room, and also they're going to have the need to have like 8-9 passengers, whereas generally speaking, the normal person generally has 4 or 5 people as what they're looking to get around. So V-Class size is much, much more user-friendly. You can park it in a normal car parking space. It's not difficult to get around. Even with a Sprinter, you need to have a D1S category of license to even drive the thing because of the size. Whereas with the V-Class, anyone can jump in and out of them. And then the level that we can go to on these is sort of similar concept to the taxi, but arguably taken even a step further. We've been involved in these sorts of coach builds, for 15, 20 years. What you can do inside of these cars now is just mind blowing. It's the same. We're using Bentley Napa leathers, mahogany wood, but with this setup, we can do a fixed partition wall with a 32-inch screen on it. And on that screen, you've got cameras facing forward and backwards, cameras facing the driver, cameras facing the speedo. And more or less, you can put anything on these that you could have on your own setup at home. So people aren't just using these now as a vehicle to get from A to B. They're using them, one, as an entertainment hub, because, picking up friends, going out for dinner, they've got fridges, whiskey cabinets, the potential usages expand massively. Or if it is on a work basis, you can fit a 5G router, 4G router, full internet coverage. You can have your screen, your work office up in front of you. And I've got a large level of customers who have sites in various different countries, various different cities. And instead of wasting the time driving for hours on end and not being able to actually do anything useful with the time, they sit in the back of these. They have retractable tables that come out, which I'll just show you here. And, you can fully use it as a workhorse, as a mobile office while you're on the go.
It makes absolute sense if you want to get stuff done, or basically you like a bit of luxury. A V-Class versus an S-Class is significantly more spacious. Like significantly more. And you can have all the stuff, like you said, your screens and tables and things and whatnot. You were saying now with the is it the EQV?
Yes.
That's their electric one. You can get air suspension.
Yeah, I mean, the one issue with the EQV is that I think it's Mercedes-Benz first sort of dip in the toe of, really exploring their full electric capabilities. I mean, I know they've got EQC and now EQS and EQA, but because it's quite a large, heavy vehicle, the quoted ranges are still quite small. So, I think they quote figures of around 200 miles. I mean, once you've got people in that and luggage, it's obviously a lot less. So, on an EQV standpoint, we're generally building when we can get the cars from Mercedes, which is a whole nother complication, because we have had 15 on order for 18 months. And I think 6 arrived all in one go. We don't know about the rest yet. But generally speaking, with customers bringing us cars that they own versus us supplying the base car as well, we're generally doing about 3 of these a month, give or take.
Okay. That's quite a lot.
Yeah, I think COVID helped because of the division wall and the partition. And when a lot of people were worrying about how they were going to get their families around, and, it was this super deadly virus that you can't touch or breathe anyone. It was fully secured off from anyone driving it, and it gave that element of security. But yeah, of those numbers, I would say, 10% maybe are on the EQV based model. Most of them we build are on the V300, which is the normal, it's a diesel. They don't have a petrol option for the UK market. So it's just a normal diesel engine.
I remember looking at, can't remember why I was looking at V-Classes. I don't think I wasn't considering buying one for this reason, but I was looking at, I was looking at cars you could do, or vans you could do camper van conversions on. Or this sort of thing, just as like seeing what the situation was. And I was incredibly surprised that you couldn't get punchy engines in any of them. Like, I'm not that surprised, because you don't actually want, like I have an E63 estate, and actually, to be honest, to drive that smoothly takes a really careful foot, because it just just wants to go. And as a passenger, that's not particularly nice. But the V-Classes were the only ones that had anything remotely resembling any power, especially when you load them up with heavy stuff.
Yeah, I think, listen, ultimately, no one is buying these to do performance-based driving. No. It's all about keeping it as smooth as possible for the rear passengers. On the taxi product, on the V-Class product, and the Sprinter-based product, we almost do nothing. We don't do anything to the power. We don't really do exhaust options, because why would someone want to do them?
No.
On the exterior, we 90% of the time keep them standard unless otherwise asked. The main reason being, if you're going to have such a high level conversion, you pretty much want to keep it hidden. You don't want to start putting spotlights on the car, and they don't really suit the car to have many mods done anyway. I mean, I've seen some of our competitors start putting Maybach grills on and Maybach badges and silly wheels on them, and that's personal preference. I mean, for me, I think if you're going to have one of these, you keep the outside standard, similar to what we said about the taxi. You can arrive and it's just another V-Class, you could be in an Addison Lee. People would only know when the doors open that there's either someone very special in there or there's a very special conversion.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Do you do anything to the sort of acoustics, the glass and stuff like that?
So glass, we can have options. I mean, the main acoustic stuff is we do a lot of soundproofing, mainly in the door cards, mainly in the division.
Okay.
We set it up in a way that the front driver could still listen to the radio and the rear passengers not hear, and vice versa. So the rear passengers, obviously, if they're trying to have a party and they've got it on full beams, then, there's going to be some level. But, we have done, and it's also down on the privacy side of things. I think, any normal conversation couldn't be heard between the front and rear sections. And we do have intercom options because at some stage you are going to need to communicate with the driver, whether you want them to pull over or change direction. But that's all very much in control of the rear user at the back. So they have a button they can press for the intercom. Or on the V-Class, you can press a button and the full 32-inch screen you have in the middle fully comes down so that you can see the driver. So you're not always completely shut off if you don't want to be.
Yeah, it's quite nice occasionally to have like a dialogue with there's a person there. So it's quite nice to acknowledge that occasionally.
I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, we deal with a lot of football players, a lot of guys in the film industry. You would be surprised at how many are very, very close. And I mean, not like close as in like employee close, more like friendship close with their drivers. They've either been in the family as a trusted member for many, many years, or they obviously spend a large amount of time together. Yeah. So, in the taxi, we had one customer who still wanted to be able to see the driver and still have the multimedia setup. So we devised a clear perspex division for the top half, so that they could still see, and then all the media we then put at a lower section of the wall so they could still have the functionality that they wanted.
Yeah, that's quite nice. And as you say, if you're one of these people that's being chauffeured around, whether it's between cities or whatever, you're spending hours and hours and hours on a daily basis with someone. So chances are you're going to chat to them a lot, and if they're your driver, they might be around for many, many, many years and whatnot. So
for sure. I mean, you also have scenarios where it's the opposite, where they're in and out of drivers, like me and you would change clothes. They don't trust anybody. They want to be very much secluded and kept off. So we cater for both sides. But what has been surprising with these is actually the bond that a lot of I think if you're a super high net worth individual celebrity, I think once you have actually let someone into your inner circle, you can become very, very trusting. And quite often we'll have scenarios where either the driver or the house manager will pretty much from start to finish manage the entire process, and we'll only meet the end user maybe twice, once to show the car and give the demo, and then a second time once we're handing over to go through everything. Everything in between A and B is dealt with by a management individual of some capacity. And that is more and more frequently we see it. I mean, it is mind-blowing how many people that we're speaking to and that we see are, considering these cars as options, buying them. And, I think on our normal retail side of things, I would say it's probably 50-50 in the terms of financing it or buying it on cash. But on these conversions, we do have finance options available. But, I'd say 80% are just buying them outright.
Fair enough. So if you want a tasty V-Class with like a, nice interior, et cetera, what's a rough, what would that cost?
Okay, so the base cars from Mercedes, assuming you can get them because of all the manufacturers we deal with at the moment, and we deal with all of them, their build times and delivery times are really more like 2 years. So assuming you can get the base cars, they range anywhere from 60 to 75, depending on if it's the diesel or if it's the EQV. Our conversions, I would say, start from around 45,000 plus VAT, and they probably go up to about 100,000 plus the VAT. And you know, we generally find with all the custom projects we're involved in, while we like to give as many options as possible, we also know that giving too many options means you never get a decision. So it's the balance between giving someone the flexibility and the options, but also doing it in a focused way, which allows us to not be trying to think how we're going to redesign this console and where we're going to put this armrest. I mean, fundamentally on the V-Class and the Taxi, we have our options. You can choose your color, you can choose your stitching. We will try to cater for additional requests, but a lot goes on behind the visual panels that a customer would never know about, that, you know, in the terms of getting the build done quickly, getting it done in a cost-effective way means, you know, when we're ordering and building our consoles, we're doing it in volumes of 10. We're not doing one ad hoc one here or there. So, we don't give... We like to keep people along a path. They can have their choice, they can have their flexibility. If they really want something that we don't have or they've seen elsewhere, then we will try to cater and make it happen.
Fish tank?
Fish tank. I love how that's the first thing that came into your mind. I actually don't think I've been asked for a fish tank before. We've been asked for jacuzzis in the back of pickup beds of trucks. That was a weird one. Because how you keep the water in there is a whole nother story.
I'm just thinking of Pimp My Ride. That's all. Back in the day of the sort of absolute rubbish that people would chuck in these sorts of vehicles.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is with us is we like to do things on a proven method. You know, you do something custom and one-off, it might look lovely and the person might think it's brilliant, but ultimately we as a business have to stand on whatever we're building, and we have to be comfortable that we're happy with what we're doing. And, you know, with the Taxi, you know, we're actually doing 2-3, we're averaging 2-3 a month of those at the moment as well. And we've got a format that we're happy with, you know, that we know we've got out on the road. We know it's reliable. You know, there will always be small things when customizing and playing with cars. But generally speaking, you know, we're very happy with the product that's being offered there. The V-Class, you know, we're doing considerable numbers really. You know, considering we've been involved in them for quite a number of years. So, you know, everything that's in certain positions, you know, it's not like someone's coming and this is the first time we're trying it. You know, we've built, you know, many examples. They're all the same. And, you know, most of the parts we're using are trusted parts, either made or we've seen in other cars, or, you know, formats that we've created that we're comfortable with.
Yeah. And for you guys, as a business, I imagine I've chatted to a few people about this sort of doing unlimited bespoke is like such a headache. Like, you know, if it's your thing, fine. But I feel like most people find if they're doing one, it's okay. Once you're doing, you know, a couple a month or, you know, so 50 a year or whatever it is, then actually doing everything completely bespoke, like it's just too much. It's too much time communicating and doing stuff.
Far too much time communicating. I think also at any given time, we're involved with so many different projects, and too much time spent trying to understand the true bespoke nature of someone's request. It then just creates a bottleneck of other projects that we're working on. You know, we did do, and this was about 4 weeks ago, you know, because apart from doing the modifications to the programs that we've obviously discussed, you know, we also have people that say, well, you know, I've seen you do X, Y, and Z, you know, can you do this for me? And we had a customer that wanted a full Brabus G800, didn't have the car, didn't have the parts, didn't have anything. and basically asked us, what can you do? And I have very rarely do you deal with someone who is generally completely open checkbook. I think with the final retail price of this car, bearing in mind the actual car cost about £160,000, I think our final bill was 350. And for those who can see the screen, I'm sharing it now. But this was a full Brabus G800 conversion. I mean, completely bonkers creation. Just see what loads up, and hopefully it's just going to give us the glitch. But with this car, we did an entire satin black exterior body repaint, the full Wide Star body kit, basically Brabus carbon fiber, absolutely everywhere you could put it. The Vossen alloy wheels. I mean, we even, bearing in mind this was a brand new car from Mercedes-Benz, he wanted us to retrim the entire car because he didn't like the leather design from Mercedes.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and that this is the power conversion that I'm showing here.
So with something like that, can you just call up Brabus and say, look, I want all the bits? Does that work? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so we all of the parts that we've actually ordered for this are Brabus, that came directly from Brabus themselves. So we go to them with the order sheet of what we want to order, and they trickle it over to us very slowly but surely. We deal with all various different part suppliers, and I think everyone's had their challenges over COVID. But due to parts related delays, I think this nearly took 6 months. And when you think the size of this thing in our workshop, to do the G800 conversion, you actually have to remove the turbos for the car and send them to Brabus for them to do an upfit to them. And you can't even drive the car. So, so you can imagine on our side of things, sort of linking back to your original question on the truly bespoke stuff, it's our passion. We love to push the boat. We love to see what's possible. And, once doing something like this, undeniably now we will go on to build a few others for people because we know the format and we can do it now. But, when our principal aim with a taxi is, by the time it's in, depending on the scale of the build, within 4 to 8 weeks, we want to be delivering it to the customer.
Yeah.
With the V-Class, it's slightly longer. It's more like 3 months. But if we have good notice from someone, so, for example, we take the order and we know the car from Mercedes is only arriving in December, there's a lot of the work we can actually get on with in the background. So a lot of the trimming, a lot of the consoles, a lot of the veneers, we can actually do it all so that when it arrives, there's far less to do.
Yeah.
So, then it goes back to something truly bespoke like this G-Wagon was, because, although we've done all these individual aspects on different cars, doing it all on one car was a very significant build.
Yeah.
It just took some time. And on our side of things, on a business side of things, and I think any car dealer or anyone involved in selling cars, your whole model is basically on stock turnover and, how quickly you've got the stock coming in, how quickly you've got it going out. And when you're messing around trying to do a very bespoke something for someone, while we would always try and cater for it, and most requests we've really had by now, I have to be honest, I haven't really had anyone reach out to us in recent time and say something I thought was completely mental. So most things we're set up to do within reason.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to sort of go over before we sort of start wrapping it up is you do a lot of right-hand drive conversions.
Yes. Yeah, fire away.
So I had on your website, you've got some examples of some of the cars and whether it's a Cadillac or whatever, and it's right-hand drive. That to get that to look good and work well, is that quite a lengthy sort of development headache, or not too bad?
No. Okay. So I couldn't even tell you how many inquiries we get a week for right-hand drive conversion. I mean, potentially 15 to 20 inquiries a week we get.
Okay.
And the lion's share of them are people who assume it's a £2,000-3,000 job. It's quick and easy. You change the steering wheel over and, it's not a big job. I mean, to put it into context, the conversion, depending on the model, they vary very slightly, but, they're around £40,000 plus VAT to be done properly. Now, we only really work with US models because there's no point us offering a conversion on a BMW 1 Series that is manufactured in left and right-hand drive. So we're mainly doing it on US cars that you can only manufactured in left-hand drive.
Yeah.
Now, the research and development costs that go into doing a specific model are extensive. There often needs to be a donor car. Our process is re-engineering, remanufacturing the drive shaft and steering rack. I've seen and we've had some conversions come back to us where people are panicking about what they've purchased, and there's chain belts connecting the drive shaft to some temporary device that has been made. Hugely dangerous. Something we never want to touch or be involved in. And our process is very much state-of-the-art production line-esque sort of manufacturing. And most of them end up going to Australia and Southeast Asia, because in Australia and Southeast Asia, left-hand drive imports are completely prohibited. You have to have a conversion. Now, Australia has very strict crash safety guidelines. So I'd say the lion's share of the conversions end up going to Australia.
Okay.
And I would say a small volume come to the UK. I think, we'd be doing anywhere between half a dozen to a dozen a year for the UK market. It comes at a sizable investment. The investment does hold value in the car, mainly because, the conversion, depending on the model, can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months from start to finish to deliver to someone.
Yeah.
So, I actually had one of the first ones come back in part exchange about 4 months ago, which was a 2018 F-150 Raptor.
Okay, yeah.
And that had 16,000 miles. We ended up selling it for 90,000 plus VAT. We have a 2018 Raptor also with about 15,000 miles in stock right now that we're selling for 60,000 plus VAT. So, the value of the investment, while it doesn't all 100% transfer over when you sell it, it does increase the value of the asset for sure. But it's, for us, a hugely labor-intensive process. Depending on what market the car is for, most of the work is actually completed in Southeast Asia. We do small volume conversions here, mostly on classic cars, but it's mainly set up in Southeast Asia because that's where it's distributed for those markets.
Yeah, that makes sense. Went to Australia a while ago, just on like a leisure trip, but I popped into a high-end car dealership and was chatting to them about this whole left-hand drive problem for them of like really high-end cars, your LaFerraris and stuff like that are only left-hand drive, and people are buying them and only driving them on like private tracks and stuff.
Private land,
or private land, it's all quite interesting.
Yeah, it's bonkers. I mean, Australia, on a custom side of things, have teetered with the idea of becoming a bit more open on their import laws, mainly in the terms of actually importing cars from the UK. But right now, it's a very difficult, market to actually send cars into because they're very rigid on their import laws. The right-hand drive conversions, because of our involvement in US based cars, and because of having the people, some people can just fundamentally not live with having a left-hand drive car in the UK. I personally have been jumping in and out of them, and all of my colleagues jump in and out of them. I mean, it's a process you get used to very, very quickly. I mean, a lot of the cars we're selling aren't the type of cars that you're going to drive to McDonald's with and be trying to get something through the window. And being on the wrong side's a problem. So, you know, there's a huge market for American cars now. Some people fundamentally can't live with it being in left-hand drive. I mean, we're doing at the moment, it's probably going to be one of the most special trucks, well, definitely in Europe, if not the world. But a customer came to us with a Dodge Ram TRX, and then he had sent it to John Hennessy. I don't know if you know Hennessy out in the States, but to do their Mammoth conversion. And he then sent it to us to convert it to right-hand drive. So it will be the only right-hand drive Mammoth TRX probably in the world, and that is nearly finished and on the way back to us, and will be going to the customer shortly. So some people, I mean, it's a really, really bonkers truck. I mean, even seeing it in standard and left-hand drive was just mind-blowing, but then converting it to right-hand drive as well, I mean, it is an unbelievable machine.
I presume he's not doing the 6x6?
No, 6x6 would almost, you know, I'd actually go as far to say it'd be impossible to register here. The DVLA, I don't know what the laws are out in the US, but they seem to promote doing that sort of bonkers stuff to their cars out there. Here, you know, to get one of those registered would be very difficult. You know, I know there's a few 6x6 G63s here. Again, hugely complicated with the DVLA to get that properly registered. I think a lot of people keep them on foreign plates and take them in and out of the country to refresh their 6 months. Well, they just disappear
for a bit and then they come back.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, I normally wrap these up with 5 questions. Car-based stuff. Are you ready?
I'm very ready.
Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
Lots of driving trips and journeys. I think the one that comes to mind actually was Salon Privé Blenheim last year. They had this section at the end of the show where they created almost a time trial, like a sprint section at the front of the palace. And I had one of our CS850 Mustangs, so one of our 850 brake horsepower Mustangs.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like an experience you couldn't pay for. I mean, driving through the Palace of Blenheim, all through the back areas, lining up in front of the palace, basically being given a green pass to do what the hell you like. And, you know, there was a few 100-meter strip where you could absolutely thrash it. But then afterwards, all the grounds and the back gardens, basically, you know, they had roped it all off so that the wardens were there. And, you know, I've done a lot of the driving tours and I've done a lot of the, you know, racing experiences, but, you know, you couldn't pay as an individual to have a green card around Blenheim Palace and, you know, basically do donuts and tear the car up. So I think that probably stands out as the most memorable because I just would never be able. No one would. You know, you just couldn't pay money to do something like that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty fun. If you could only drive one car for the rest of your life,
you can't ask that to a car dealer. You know, do I get a situation? So you can, and you have.
You get a cheap car on the side, and one car. So it can be. It can be a sports car of any value.
I think.
But it's
I think they're all. Listen, I think when you think rest of your life, you've obviously got to think that you probably need a boot and you probably need to have ISOFIX options. Or
this is why you can have a cheap car. This is why you can have a cheap car on the side. Whether you want to put your family in a relatively cheap car, that's up to you. But
I think probably the best all-rounder for me at the moment would probably be the newer generation of the Bentley Continental. I think you get the performance-based thrill when you can go for the W12. I think you get the luxury and comfort that very few other cars can give you. You can have 4 people in it. You can have ISOFIX in it. You can have golf clubs in the boot. So I think if I had to commit to one for the rest of my life, given all life's different scenarios, that one would probably cover enough boxes that I'd be happy with it.
And you would go W12, not V8?
Probably just because you could as an option. I mean, don't get me wrong, the V8 is a beautiful engine. We've got a Bentayga amongst some of the cars with the W. So, yeah, I mean, that would be the only consideration is what engine to go.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all going now hybrid and electric soon as the news with those. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very... I had someone asking me recently, their other half had bought a Continental and they wanted a nice car. And we ran through a bunch of options and I was like, seriously? I think what you're asking me is like, can I have a 2 Bentley garage?
Yeah.
And I know you don't like the answer and you want to have something else, but everything you're telling me about a car you want, I feel like is in that car.
It is in that car. Exactly. So yeah, I think that would be my one for life.
Fair enough. What is the most undervalued car at the moment? What should be worth more?
I don't think anything. I think everything's overvalued at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know of any desirable cars currently that you can buy at sensible money, really. I think if I'm probably biased towards this one, but if you've got up to £50,000 to spend, I don't think you can beat a Ford Mustang, to be honest. You get the 5-litre V8, you get, over 400 brake horsepower. You don't get, you have with some supercars or Porsches, you have some people that react badly to them. They give a preconception to that person or that buyer. I had a Mustang for 2017. I had it for over a year, and I have never had a car like it. Every petrol station, people just coming to have a chat with you. Every street corner, people putting thumbs up and just a general love for it. So I think if you've got 50 grand to spend, I don't think there's any other car you can buy brand new that will give you the performance, the driving experience, the community aspect than the new shape Mustangs do.
Yeah, fair. And I think there's a lot in that sort of cheaper sort of performance car. Something like the Mustang it's accessible. It's more accessible to everyone. So people are more friendly. Like people will approach you and chat to you about it because they can sort of go, I could probably get one of those, or I've got one, or whatever, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Whereas as soon as you start getting more and more extreme and as it just goes up and up and up and up and up and up, people like, no one's coming to talk to you.
Yeah.
Or they might,
exactly.
but like not the same number. What is the most interesting car to you at the moment? What are you Googling? What are you looking up?
I think what I'm Googling and researching the most is obviously this surgence of electric cars. I wouldn't say they're as much personal interest to me, but obviously our industry is going that way, and you have to be on top with. I mean, the Lucid Air that's coming out is just the most ridiculous looking car. I actually saw one at Goodwood and ordered one. But
can you order them here, or is that a import job?
If you wanted one as of today, I could import you one and have it registered, and you'd have it in about 3 months' time, give or take. But that would be in left-hand drive. Right-hand drive has been confirmed, and for the life of me, I tried to eke it out of them in Goodwood. No one was saying a thing. My guessing is it's going to be 2024. Right-hand drive, but you're dealing with a 1,111 horsepower, 600-mile range, and the interior, I wouldn't say Bentley level, but not far off. Really high quality build. So I think coming forward, that probably looks like one of the most interesting. But my passion is very loud and very powerful engines, not electric cars. So maybe the 812. I always have I love the 812. So that would be my
cool things. Right. Final question: 5-car garage, unlimited value.
Right, one classic for sure. So I would say the 1967 Mustang,
Cool.
fully restored, the whole shebang.
Yeah. Would you keep
Um,
it sort of classic, or would you mess with it?
yeah, well, no, I think I do. It would be fully restored. Classic looking from the exterior for sure. Engine choice, probably an old school big block. And yeah, probably more of a classic theme, but all fully restored.
Yeah.
Um, you'd need an SUV for sure. I think probably new shape G wagon or the Brabus
Yeah.
G800 we spoke about before. That would be
Nice.
very nice. Um, Bentley Continental, like I said, that's like your all-round sort of Grand
Yeah.
Tourer. The supercar or the hypercar. You'd have to throw Koenigsegg in the mix.
Yeah.
Undecided as to which one, but I think the Koenigsegg brand is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that would be hypercar. And then I think you need one American muscle car, wouldn't you? So a new American muscle car. So maybe a Dodge Demon or a Dodge Hellcat, something along those lines. Was that five? Or was that six?
I feel like that's
I
five.
think that was five.
That's five.
Five.
The Demon is the sort of the late. It's like the 800 and whatever horsepower one, isn't it? Have they done?
Yeah.
Is there a level? Have they done anything since that has made it more extreme or anything?
Yeah, so the Demon, I think, was the only one that was a limited production run. So they did 3,300 and they'll never produce another. So they have created something called a Superstock, which power-wise is essentially the Demon engine.
Yeah.
And I have seen rumors of another one that they're teetering doing 1,000 horsepower version. God knows what they'll call it. It will probably be some dynamic creature or something. But yeah, I think, to be honest, the Hellcat at 717 brake horsepower, is anyone going to notice the 80 horsepower difference? Maybe Lewis Hamilton would, but your average Joe, I think, probably wouldn't. It was more interesting because it was a low volume car, and you just couldn't get another one. So that was what made them interesting.
Yeah, and presumably those. I've not driven one. I've seen videos and whatnot. Presumably traction is a major issue.
You would be surprised. I mean, listen, if you're comparing it to, like some of the Mercedes or some of the European offerings that have the computers and the gizmos to keep you grounded, you buy a car for that, for the experience. It is so rogue. It is so raw. They're quite heavy and they do have a very wide stance. So the traction is a lot better than what I think you'd probably assume. But yeah, I think, best suited on a straight line, a Hellcat, undoubtedly. And just an enormous amount of power. When you really put your foot down in one of those, you get the traditional American V8 supercharger whine. You've just got an explosion of sound coming behind you, and you're sitting, usually to get that kind of experience, you're sitting in like a cramped sports seat. They're designed for the man really that is 6 foot plus and has enjoyed his pints and food. And you can sit in these big comfort seats, and they're an amazing experience, those cars.
Yeah, they look a lot of fun, and they sort of embody that kind of American muscle.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast for a bit of a chat.
Really enjoyed it. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Appreciate the time. And if any of your viewers or any of your listeners didn't see any of the stuff we were viewing, our website, I'm sure you'll include some of the information, but it's all on clivesutton.co.uk. And our configurators and all visual demonstrations are all easily findable on the website.
Cool. And then your London dealership, is that near Lord's?
Correct. Yeah. So we're based on our head office premises is in the Lord's Cricket Ground, just off the roundabout.
Yeah.
We're actually in the process of moving. Well, we've been looking for 7 months. I mean, property in London. If any of your listeners have property in London, please reach out to us. But we have been looking for, we've been looking for a while to move, sort of in the Park Royal-esque area, because at the moment we're divisionally split across sort of 3 different sites. But we would love to have all of our beautiful toys under one roof. And then, the plans at the moment, we sort of on average have about 60 cars in stock. But we would like to get to a place where we're at sort of 120, 140 sort of level. So need more space, and bang in the centre of London, there is none of it.
There is not. But cool. Well, thanks very much.
Pleasure. Thanks so much.